John Gill's Exposition of the entire Bible. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, the introduction. Brought to you by Discovering the Scriptures, being read by Dr. Peter John. Introduction to 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. In this chapter, the apostle proceeds to exhort, in general, to the performance of good works, particularly to purity of life, to brotherly love, to quietness, diligence, and industry in the several callings of life, and not to mourn in an excessive, immoderate manner for deceased friends, which leads him to say something concerning the second coming of Christ and the resurrection of the dead. The general exhortation to holiness is in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 1, which is pressed in a way of entreaty for the sake of Christ and the duties urged to where the commandments of Christ, in which the apostles had given them, and they had received and were well acquainted with, and besides, a walk according to these commands was well pleasing to God. A sanctification in general was his will, and in particular the apostle exhorted to abstain from fornication and all uncleanness, since it is a dishonoring the body of man, acting the part of the ignorant Gentiles that know not God, defrauding another man, as is uncleanliness with another man's wife. The vengeance of God will light on such. It is contrary to that calling with which the saints are called, that being to holiness and not uncleanliness, and to despise this exhortation is casting contempt not upon man, but God himself. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 4. Brotherly love is the next thing exhorted to, which seem needless to write about, since in regeneration these saints were taught to exercise it, and had exercised it towards all the brethren throughout Macedonia, though it was necessary to exhort them to abound more and more in it. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 9, and to study peace and quietness, and be industrious in their business, that so they might live an honest life among their carnal neighbors, and not be in want of anything from them. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 11. And whereas some of them had lost some of their dear friends and relations to death, and were ready to exceed due bounds in their sorrows for them, he dehorts from such immoderate sorrow, as being like that of those who had no hope of a resurrection from the dead, whereas, seeing it was an article of their faith that Christ was risen from the dead, they might assure themselves that those who sleep in him shall be brought along with him when he shall appear a second time. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 13, which will not be prevented by those who are alive when Christ comes. For as they will be changed, the dead in Christ will be raised at his coming, which coming of his will be in person from heaven with a shout, the voice of the archangel, the trumpet of God, and then both shall be caught up together to meet him in the air, and be forever with him. And therefore they had no need to sorrow any others, since they shall meet again and never part more. And with these which words they should comfort one another under their present loss. 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 15. And of the introduction of 1 Thessalonians chapter 4.